Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Colin von Liebtag. I'm actually a two-time Rutgers alumnus, and I currently head up our Alumni Career Development program at the university. I see resumes day in and day out. I'm really happy to talk with you about different resume tips and strategies, but also answer a lot of the questions about resumes today. We had some great questions that came through in advance during the registration process. So I'm going to provide answers to those questions. And we'll talk about them in the context of 4 pillars that are going to help you to really make the most of your resumes. So look for the answers to those questions within the 4-pillar discussion that we're going to have. Also, I'd like to take as many live questions as we can. So I'm going to try to leave some time for that at the end as well. Feel free to have those come in through the chat box. Make sure that you're asking them there, and we'll get to them as best we can, okay? For those that we don't get to, though, we'll do our best to answer them on social after the program. All right, well, enough about me. Let's talk resumes, okay? So let's get started. Before we get to those advanced questions that I talked about, we'll cover these 4 main pillars to really create a strong resume. These concepts should really be at the foundation of any good resume. It's going to help to make it more impactful and meaningful. And your resume really is so important because it's your professional identity on paper or on screen. And since your resume is such a powerful tool for self-marketing, it's really so essential to the job search as a whole also. So many of the tips that we're going to talk about now, those are things that you can use and repurpose and also reconsider in other ways, like on interviews or as you create your LinkedIn profiles, social media accounts, things like that. So think of the resume almost like as the trunk of a tree. But there's a lot of other branches that you can use based on the talking points and the bullet points that we're talking about developing within the resume itself. All right, so the first pillar. First pillar is really to consider making your resume ATS friendly. ATS. So what is ATS? Many of you might have heard of it before. Some of you may not. So for ATS, it stands for Applicant Tracking Systems or Applicant Tracking Software. And this is something that's used by 75% or so of large companies. And there's a lot of smaller organizations now, mid-sized organizations that are using it too. ATS is basically the online application system. So there's knockout questions that you might see on applications. That's part of ATS. The job posting itself might have been done through an ATS. But the really key component as it pertains to resumes is when the company gets your resume, they view it within the ATS system. And so they're looking for certain things. They're running scans of your resume to see if you have certain sections, keywords, phrases, things like that. So we're going to talk about the different components to make your resume ATS friendly and ATS successful. Now, the thing to remember about ATS is that someone is viewing this, usually an HR or hiring manager on the other side of the computer. But they're relying on the computer and the artificial intelligence to do a lot of the work for them to make it easier to get through all those applications. They may have 1,000 applications for any one given job, maybe a couple hundred. The way they're going to pare down the candidates for those jobs is through ATS because they can't look at every resume. When people look at a resume, they spend maybe 30 to 60 seconds or so on it. So you have, the human eye test that it's got to pass, but also the artificial intelligence eye, which is ATS. And about 70% or so of resumes are never actually really seen by somebody like a hiring manager to take an in-depth look at it because it doesn't get past ATS. So ATS is critical to, any successful resume. You have to be able to get through the tracking systems, and that's part of what we're going to spend the bulk of talking about today. So the really key thing here for you are the keywords and phrases from the job description. You want to analyze the job description and see what kind of content is in there. What are they talking about in terms of skills, qualifications, requirements, educational background, various experiences you've had? How can you then take those same keywords and phrases and include them into your resume and application materials? That's the challenge for you. So it's great to make a list of what you're seeing in that job description. What are those keywords and phrases that they talk about that are specific to your industry, to the company, to the job? And these things might vary a little bit even. One organization might call it a marketing manager. The other might say content creation specialist. So if the essence of what you've done in terms of your work experience, your educational background, your skill set, so on and so forth, are along those lines, make sure you're mirroring the language that they use too. And you'll notice certain keywords and phrases also as it pertains to skill sets. It could be languages that you know. It could be technical skill sets like AutoCAD or SolidWorks. It could be, Excel, financial modeling and forecasting through Excel, or creating pivot tables. Look for whatever those keywords and phrases are as it pertains to your skill sets too. And we're going to talk about how to meaningfully incorporate the skill sets sections into your resume too. You also want to consider quality over quantity. When you're dealing with ATS, it's a computer system. So it's not as concerned, if you have a 2-page resume versus a 1-page resume typically. So make sure it's good quality phrases, keywords, action verbs, content that you're putting in there. It's something that matches up really well with the job that you're going for, the industry that you're a part of, the company that you're applying to. Try to keep the format simple, easy to follow. I'd recommend avoiding templates. I know they make life a lot easier in terms of making the resumes, but sometimes it's not as friendly to the ATS system. So you want to avoid things like borders, charts, tables, graphs, pictures, icons. All of those things can get kind of messy or clunky in a given ATS. And there's different types of ATS out there. So it can be a little bit hard to predict how it'll read your resume if it's not a simple kind of format. So try to keep it very simple. Use bold, use italics, underline, all capital letters, putting things in terms of spacing, so there's spaces between, or maybe it's centered in the middle. That's how you can differentiate sections or key titles or things like that on your resume. But try to avoid those other formatting potential issues. Make sure your titles that you're using for your sections make sense and that they're well titled, that they're descriptive. If you're a marketing manager and you're going for marketing manager jobs and the past 3 jobs you've had were marketing manager roles, then maybe title your section something like marketing management experience. It's something that will help when someone's scanning your resume visually as an individual, spending 30 seconds looking at it. It'll pop right out. Wow, you've got 3 jobs related to marketing management. That's exactly what we're looking for. But it also helps with increasing your keyword count in ATS. The other part of ATS is that they don't just look at the keywords themselves, but certain keywords hold more value or weight than others. So you want to make sure that as you look at the job description, you're taking a close look at, what words are showing up repeatedly. Which words seem to be most prominent in that job description? And those are the ones you really want to focus on, because chances are they're probably being weighed a little bit more heavily than the others. Also, try to make your resume clickable. So if you have a link to your LinkedIn account, an online portfolio, your GitHub, maybe a website that you've created, any kind of content like that, a research article that you published, provide the hyperlink within the text of the resume so that it's easily formatted and clickable for someone. If they're viewing it on their mobile device or their personal desktop at home with work from home, or maybe even a work computer, you want to make sure that it's something that they can easily access as they're looking into your background. They may have seen something really interesting within your profile. That's your chance to now capitalize on it by linking them to some great content that helps you to stand out as an applicant. Also, try to avoid abbreviations. So this may pertain to credentials that you have or academic degrees, things like that. It's better to spell out, Master of Social Work or, Master of Business Administration, that kind of thing, rather than MBA or MSW. So try to avoid abbreviations, especially if they're ones that are not really universally known or accepted. It might have been something kind of inherent to your company or organization, and everybody might not know about that. The other consideration with this is that people reviewing your resumes may be HR personnel that are not as well versed or knowledgeable about your specific field, especially if it's something technical. A hiring manager in your department might be, but someone who works as an HR frontline recruiter might not be. So you don't want to take that chance and have them miss out on something Again, using ATS, it's a computer system. So if it's programmed to read Master of Business Administration versus MBA, you might be missing an opportunity there. So keep that in mind about abbreviations. And then lastly, usually the best formats are either a Word doc or a PDF in terms of file format for your online application submissions. PDF is nice too because it really locks in your formatting. So if you're ever sending it as an attachment or something like that in an email, you're pretty good with that format in terms of the person getting it the way you intended it to be read. All right, second pillar, match the job. So this obviously ties in with dissecting that job description and analyzing it for good content, keywords, phrases, things like that. But you really want to tailor your resume, your cover letter, your application materials as much as you can towards the job, the company, and the industry. So again, if they call something marketing manager and you're calling it a content creation specialist, that's a missed opportunity. If it's in essence the same exact work that you've done, and you're not being misleading by retitling your work or just defining what your role was or using some of their keywords and phrases, then that's okay to do. As long as you're being accurate, you're being truthful, you're okay, and things match up. So tailor it as much as you can. Look at what the company mission statement is. Look at the values of the company. See how those fit in with the work that you've done and your experiences. You want to tailor that resume as much as you can to the individual job, company, industry. Part of how you can also do that is by creating a professional summary or profile at the top of your resume. And this could be a simple 3-line statement, kind of takes the place of an objective historically. And within this, you're describing your education, skills, and experience, the things that are going to match up with that job. And that's low-hanging fruit. You can create something like that, make it chock full of keywords and phrases. It lines up directly with the job, and it's something you can write pretty quickly. If you see a job in the morning, you recraft your professional summary at the top. You've got great keywords and phrases in there now. It matches up with that job. You looked at the headers on your resume, make sure they match up. That's something you can do pretty quickly. Get that application out by the afternoon. You're not missing an opportunity. So the job description is really your best friend. It's the hints, it's the clues, it's the blueprint for all the good content that you need to incorporate into your resume to match that up with that job. Also, I'd recommend doing another layer of research on this. Look at people who hold the job that you're going for and look up their profiles on LinkedIn. So do keyword searches for the company, for job titles, things like that, and find people who are doing the job either at your company of interest or a similar company in a similar role, and see how they're describing their job. What is it that they do? What are their skill sets that they have? What are the kind of projects that they work on? It's great to get some of the vocabulary and the language and how they're describing what they do as well, because these are the people that are actually doing it. So, always look at that as a potential resource of how to kind of craft some of how you're describing your related experience and skills, et cetera. Research, so both the organization and the job through LinkedIn as a great resource for you, but also look at their social media accounts. If you can do any networking, that's a great way to get an edge and get a sense of things that the company values, whether through the application process or just in a given employee. So you can highlight those things. An example would be looking at a company's mission statement or credo. They may talk about how they really value volunteer work. So if that's something that is really important to that organization, you may consider including a volunteer section with a couple points on the resume. So now you've tailored it more to that organization. In terms of segmenting your skills section, we talked about that a little bit in terms of the kind of skills that you could include there. But within a skills section, you can also kind of make subcategories, if you will. You might have something that's kind of more general or transferable skills that you're highlighting. And these could be things related to like project management, report writing and analysis, employee training. The other subsection you might include would be something job specific. So it might be AutoCAD or Google Analytics or financial modeling and forecasting. Those are things that are going to be specific skills or program software that you need for that given job. So think about how you can help your skills to stand out in a more meaningful way. The other benefit of this is that it gives you the opportunity to include some really transferable skills that you may see listed in the job description, but you can do it in a specific way that makes sense for that job. Try to match your headers, your bullet points, your professional summary. Make sure those keywords and phrases, the order, the sequence, all those things match up well with what you're seeing as priorities within that job. And then, as we talked about a little bit before, consider naming those sections. So what's the order of the sections? What makes sense, if they're looking for someone who's a marketing manager but also has some event planning experience. But the marketing manager piece is really the prominent part of that job. Make sure that marketing manager section goes first, and then the event planning section comes second. Also consider how you're ordering those bullet point statements and how they make sense. The level of experience that you have may impact this a bit. If you have more of your experience really coming from your educational background and less through work experience, then you may lead with an education section over work experience that's unrelated, or vice versa. You've been graduated for a few years now, you have some work experience. It'd be better to lead with the professional experience you have and list the educational experience section with your degree and things like that a little bit lower on the resume. Also, if you're in a very technical field or one that's very skills heavy, you may move the skills section up towards the top of the resume to show that you have the requisite skill set to be successful in the field. All right, third pillar, you got to show value for the reader. So this really lies in making impactful bullet point statements. And how you do this, it's a very simple format. Just follow these 3 questions that you can ask of yourself. And then basically what you're going to do is write the response to those questions into a 1 or 2 line bullet point statement. So you're going to say what you did, you're going to say how you did it, and you're going to say why it mattered. So what you did is a simple description of a project that you worked on. How you did it are the skills that you used to accomplish this. And then why it matters, that's really the purpose or the impact or the proof that you were successful with this. And we're going to look at an example in just a second. So how you can do this is something called the STAR method. Many of you might have heard of this. STAR just stands for situation/task, actions, and results. So situation/task, actions, results. That's the STAR method. That's going to help you to answer that, what you did, how you did it, why it mattered. Always start these bullet points off with action verbs, and make sure you watch the tense of it too. If you previously were in that role, then you'd use past tense. So you evaluated something. If it's something you're currently doing, then it would be more like evaluate website performance. So always watch your tense there. Make sure they match up well with your dates of employment. And try to be as purposeful as possible. So, here's 2 examples you can use. Evaluated website performance using Google Analytics to enhance social media marketing on Facebook and increase sales by 10% in 3-month span. So that gives us a very concrete sense of the project you worked on, the skills you used to accomplish this, and then what those meaningful results are that matter. A second example. Analyze economic and industry trends from COVID-19 impact on financial markets using Excel spreadsheets and pivot tables to create forecasting models that impact client investments. We're showing why this work matters, how we accomplished it, but what was that work that we did, and why was it so important? And you can do that within a 1 to 2 line bullet point statement utilizing that 3-step kind of process. All right, the last pillar before we get to some of these questions. Don't say it, show it. It's really easy to say you're an excellent communicator or you're a team player. These overused, nondescript, generalized kind of statements that really aren't informing anybody about anything. It just kind of sounds good, right? But the way you take that up a notch and you differentiate yourself is to really give context, give examples of it. So show how you're an excellent communicator instead of saying it by describing in one of your bullet points a presentation that you gave, a report that you wrote, or a training session that you held, and walk through that 3-step process of what you did, how you did it, why it mattered. Whenever possible, quantify. In those 2 bullet point examples I gave you, we were able to quantify that we increased sales by 10% within a 3-month span. Sometimes quantification isn't possible, though. It's not as clean cut as a number where we know we increase something or decrease something. So in that case, try to be purpose driven. So in the second example, we talked about how we did this kind of industry trend analysis and economic analysis in order to create forecasting models that would impact client investments. So it doesn't give us a hard number that we, enhance client investments by, 50% margins or anything like that, but it shows the purpose behind why we did what we did. And this is a great chance for you to really utilize your keywords, phrases, your skills, really give context to the work that you're doing, the experiences that you have. Much more effective to use the STAR technique than to just say that you can do something. All right, so those are our 4 pillars in a nutshell, and I think it addressed a lot of the questions that came in advance, but I want to make sure that we get to some others that might not have been covered by that. So one question was about hiring resume writing services. In general, I would approach it with a grain of salt and a little bit of caution. You might do better working with a dedicated career coach who can also help you with a resume versus just a resume writing service that you might hire. It could be a little bit more expensive. I realize that, but you'll probably get more one-on-one support with it, more feedback, someone who's going to take more interest in you and your background. My experience working with individuals who've utilized the resume writing services is that it isn't necessarily something that felt customized to them. It felt like it was more of a generic template that they kind of plug some information into. I'd also recommend certainly, contacting your career service office. So, whichever campus you graduated from, they have a career center that still services alumni in one form or another. Reach out to them and see what kind of services they can provide in terms of a resume critique or something like that. That can go a long way to getting you, on the right step. Another question: how do you make a resume when you have little experience? Or a similar question that kind of ties in with this is, how do you fill in gaps in work history if you're returning to work or you've been out of the workforce for a little bit? So the central question is really around experience. Either you have a little bit or it's not as recent and you need to return. So here, some of the keys are really focus on the positives. So what is it that you do bring to the table? What is your educational experience? What kind of projects have you worked on? Have you had certain training that you've undergone? Have you gotten a certificate in something? Have you done volunteer work? What are some of the transferable skills and experiences that you can have to kind of get some momentum and build some opportunity from there? This may be something like independent consulting work or freelance work that you've done. And that, honestly, it could be one client you've worked with. It could be someone you assisted with a project. It could be paid or unpaid. You're still using skill sets. You're still using your experience to benefit someone on a project, pertaining to the kind of field that you're in. I've worked with people who were in accounting and were on a period of transition in their careers and had a bit of a gap. They volunteered at their local church to do the books and help with accounting and bookkeeping. I worked with an environmental science student who didn't have much experience. They were looking for an internship. They did an independent project based off of knowledge they got from their coursework. And this was during Hurricane Sandy. So they actually lived down at the shore. Their community was devastated. They did some soil and water sampling and testing, sent it off to the EPA, got a huge grant for the community revitalization. That's something that they're putting on the resume. They're using as an elevator pitch component. They're using as a talking point in an interview. It makes them stand out. You might build computers and work in IT, and you might have a side business on Etsy where you're utilizing business management skills. Think about all those other kinds of things that you're doing that have transferability to them. And this one's a little bit more of a hard pill to swallow, but if you notice that you really have some serious gaps and areas for professional development, then it might be that you need to take some opportunity to do some short-term reinvestment in yourself in a professional development or growth way. So look for opportunities that are project-based learning, certificate programs, things that will give you tangible skill sets you can walk away with, actual experience from the projects you're doing as part of the coursework. And a lot of these are virtual. They're online now. You could do it through something like Coursera, Udacity. It's going to depend on your field and your area of interest. but it gives you a relevant skill set, relevant experience, more recent experience, and it gives you a chance to kind of get out in front of things and reinvest sooner than later. The other component with this is try to get in front of it. Address it in the cover letter, get out in front of it, control the narrative as best you can. It's okay to allude to a family situation, maternity leave, paternity leave, maybe a medical situation that came up, but let them know that that's, been addressed or taken care of. You're re-entering the workforce, that kind of thing. And then shift the conversation immediately to the great skills and abilities and experiences and education that you do bring to the table. There were also some questions around ageism and how much work history to include. So I'm going to kind of couple those together. Try it if you can, and you're really concerned about this. It is a very unfortunate thing that does occur, but you may consider leaving the dates off from graduation. That's one common strategy people might use. You may also include only the most recent 10 to 15 years or so of your work history or experience. That's pretty safe to put on the resume. It's also going to be the most relevant. Obviously, technology changes and things like that. So 10 to 15 years is going to be the more relevant stuff than something that was 20, 30 years ago. Relevancy really is your litmus test here. That's the key. Is the experience relevant? Does it show my background in a meaningful way that connects to that job opportunity? And it may also be around how you frame your experience. So you may consider more of a hybrid kind of a format for your resume where you use different titles. So instead of just everything being under a work experience or professional experience section and you use reverse chronology and work your way backwards, you may break it into those sections that are more like marketing manager, event planner, and then group the experience according to those things. When you do that, the emphasis is more on the skill set and the area of expertise that you have. And then secondary comes when you did those things. But when you group everything in just one chronological order, you can't help but notice the dates on it. Ideal length for a resume. Another question came up around that. You're looking at 1 to 2 pages or so. I've worked with executives at Fortune 500 companies, and they didn't even go over 2 pages with 20, 30 years of work experience. So stick to 1 to 2 pages. And for a CV, you can obviously go longer if you're looking at research or academic teaching positions, things like that. That could be much longer because it'll include a lot of other relevant kind of material there. You don't need to include references. There was a question around that. No need to include references on the resume. That'll be part of the application process. They'll let you know when they want references. General piece of advice, try to avoid typos. I know it sounds simple and straightforward, but about 60% of resumes actually contain a typo. And about 40% of hiring managers will automatically discard a resume because of a typo. So one way you can already get ahead of your competition is avoid your typos. We have a great resource for alumni. It's funded by the Rutgers University Alumni Association, so it's free for you to use. Grammarly Premium. You can sign up through ouralumni.com/career resources. Look on the second page and you'll see a listing for Grammarly Premium. You can basically fill out a form, register for your account there. You have 3 months of free access. If you want 3 more months after that, you just got to fill the form out again. We have literally, I think, like 2 minutes for some more live questions. So I'm going to try to jump into those as best I can here. There won't be handouts for this, unfortunately, but you have the program recorded. It's going to be live on YouTube. Well, it is live on YouTube now, but it will be recorded immediately and following posted on YouTube. So you can always refer back to it. So maybe consider that your virtual handout, if you will. ATS formatting, yes, try to avoid columns. Too many bullets, you're typically within somewhere around 3 to 5 for a directly related role. Try to stick within a 3 to 5 range. If it's something that's just transferable and not so directly related, maybe 1 to 2 bullet points. Thanks for that question, Christopher. From Deborah, in a resume, what is the best way to list guest speaker lecture activities? It's going to depend a little bit on your field. If you're doing training and consultation, or training, learning, talent development, or you're a teacher and you're going for a teaching role, you may list it a little bit differently. So what I would do is align a section in terms of the title of that section with the job that you're going for. So if it's something related to, like learning, training, talent development, maybe you create something in that space and then list some of those speaker, lecturer kind of activities there. If it's something more related to education, maybe you did some curriculum development, some planning, things like that, you might be able to list it a little bit more in that realm. So go based off the kind of job that you're going for. But that's a great way, a perfect example, Deborah, about how to incorporate specific communication skills on the resume. Something around guest speaking, lecturing. From Sue, what about being out of the workforce due to COVID? Obviously a unique challenge, and one that unfortunately many people have experienced and are currently experiencing. So thank you for asking that. I think with COVID, there's certainly a degree of understanding around it that it is something that for the past year and a half or so now has created extreme disruption in many industries, a lot of challenges around that. So I think that's something that should probably be addressed a little bit more so in the cover letter and then hopefully the interview, if you're able to get to that stage of things. With the resume, I would recommend more so maybe that formatting of putting the emphasis on the skills and the experience in your different sections, making sure everything aligns and you're doing all those other factors. But then in the cover letter, you might address that more, that you were unfortunately laid off due to COVID, have been doing other professional kinds of activities. So that's where you shift the attention. Once you kind of take ownership of the challenge around that in the cover letter or in an email, if you're doing an email versus a cover letter these days, then it might be more about making a transition to your relevant skills. So despite being out of the workforce for the past year or so, here's what I was able to do. Here's how I did reinvest in myself professionally. And it's never too late. If you haven't had the opportunity for one reason or another, try to start now then. It's never too late to at least start investing. And then that covers some gaps, because God forbid the employment market still isn't good for you for another 3 months. Well, at least you started something today, and now you've been doing that for the past 3 months, and you list that. So now that closed the gap that much more. But do think about those other unique opportunities, volunteer or otherwise, you might be able to list. And unfortunately, I've only got time for one more question here. Again, we'll try to get to the other ones on social. If you had totally unrelated work experience, this is from Christopher. Thank you, Christopher. If you had totally unrelated work experience, like let's say in a restaurant, should it be listed on the resume or kept off? What I would say is it's going to depend on the amount of experience you have altogether. If you don't have much to work from, then I would try to say, how can you incorporate that in a transferable kind of way? With something like the restaurant industry, it might be related to scheduling, employee management and training, financial management. If you're, handling financial transactions, you might be dealing with inventory, vendors, contract negotiation, customer service, organizational skills. There's a lot of other things that can come from restaurant industry, and it's where a lot of people honestly have gotten their starts in terms of their first jobs or jobs that were, during a transition period even. So look at the transferability of the skills. Start with the job you want to go for, then look at how the skills, some of the ones I just talked about, could match up with that job that you're looking at. And then those are the things I would highlight in maybe 1 to 2 bullet points or so about that job. I wouldn't spend a ton of time on that with the resume, but it's okay to list it. And again, it might cover up a gap in employment. That's okay. You're showing activity, you're showing relevancy. So see what you can extract from that to make it meaningful. So unfortunately, I'm sorry, this is all the time we had for today on this. I actually ran a few minutes over, so thanks for sticking with me. Again, the recording is going to be posted on YouTube immediately following the session, and we'll try to address some of the questions we weren't able to get to on social. If you have follow-up questions, concerns, we have a ton of great resources on our website, alumni.com/career resources. You can also follow us on social. Just look for Rutgers University Alumni Association. Rutgers University Alumni Association. Thanks so much for being with me, and wish you all the best and continue to be well.